Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I am Meryl Goldstein's assistant, and I thought today we'd take some time while all of us are in this isolation and interview her and find out what is going on in her world and what is going on in the world of her clients, and be here to serve and answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to comment. So, Meryl, how are you doing?
I am doing good,
How are you doing in
and
isolation?
kind of well. It's tough. I definitely start to feel like I'm going a little bit stir crazy at times, and
Yeah,
feel like I want to get out, and I miss seeing my clients in person.
right.
Although it's kind of interesting sometimes. At least when I do phone sessions with people, they end up being able to talk about things that are harder to talk about when you're face to face. So
Right.
sometimes the work actually goes a little deeper when you do it that way.
Mm.
But mostly we're all making do and keeping things up, you know. Um, some people are more focused right now on just surviving the situation and real life worries like about getting sick or staying safe or money. And other clients are continuing to do internal work, talking about relationship issues and anxieties and inhibitions and
Yeah,
anger and stuff that they struggle with on the inside of their minds.
right. What do you think has come up the most right now? Because this is something that none of us in our whole, especially our age group, none of us have gone through ever before. So what do you
Yeah,
think that feeling is?
yeah. I mean, it certainly is something very unprecedented, and no one really has a template for how to cope with this kind of
Right,
situation.
right.
What I'm finding really interesting is that a lot of my clients are feeling almost pushed into or forced into um, a situation of self-reflection
Hmm.
and change, inner change, that
Hmm.
maybe some people weren't really actually prepared for. So a lot of my clients have a lot of time to either spend with family members or with themselves and to actually stop and just focus and reflect. And people are starting to actually really make shifts in terms of letting go of certain things that they were holding on to or trying to control, or forgiving people, reevaluating their expectations. Sometimes even just sitting with yourself, you can sort of go over the past and you start thinking about things that have happened and things that you've done. And some people feel regret or remorse. And what I'm finding is that people are feeling almost like they are changing so fast,
Hmm.
but they haven't really had time to get used to the idea or to figure out what they're leaving behind or process it or do the grief work that's often a part of letting go of certain parts of ourselves or our past or our relationships. So people are like a little bit overwhelmed, I would say, by the kind of change that's happening on the inside.
Right. You mentioned forgiveness. Um, what would you say is the best what would you be the best tool that you could offer for forgiveness right now? Because that is a huge one for most of us, even when we're not in isolation, right? And when we are isolated and we're home by ourselves, or maybe even say a spouse that has been an issue of our forgiveness, what would be the number one thing you could suggest when you're, especially with that person that has hurt you? What is a good tool?
Yeah, I don't know that forgiveness is something that there's like a technique or you could kind of force it. I think it's something that comes. I think it's part of acceptance, it's part of letting go. And that's usually the end step in a process, right? That sort of, whenever we're trying to make peace with something, we often have a lot of emotions and feelings and we fight and we sort of in a way protest. We get into this protesting mode. No, I'm not going to accept it. It's not okay. It wasn't fair. It shouldn't have happened. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And I think at a certain point people start to get tired of that and they resign themselves to just sort of letting go and saying, you know what, I accept the way it is. I accept the way it was. I'm not going to hold on to this anymore. And I think the hardest part a lot of times is forgiving ourselves, right? And people who kind of look back on things and you could feel a lot of remorse or regret, that you've hurt people or that you saw things a certain way at a certain point in your life. And now maybe you see it with more context or you see a bigger picture. I think I think forgiveness is something that liberates us.
Oh,
It's not something
absolutely.
someone has to do or I ever push on somebody, but I think sometimes people get to a point where they want to forgive. They want to forgive themselves and they want to forgive others. And I think I view forgiveness as very linked to acceptance and to letting go, where you're actually just ready to let go of something and to be liberated from it so it doesn't have that hold over you anymore.
Do you think sometime forgiveness has to do, especially because, like you're saying, forgiveness of ourselves is the hardest thing? What would you say about forgiveness and self-worth? Do you think maybe even just in the climate we're in right now, you're sitting there in thinking about forgiveness? So, okay, maybe we let go of something that's happened with somebody else, but what about ourselves and what it does to our whole system, our whole worthiness?
Yeah, I think that any painful emotion or psychological experience, so feeling remorse, that means you feel sorry for something that you've done, or you feel very bad about the way that you've hurt somebody else, or the damage that you've done, or you feel regret over something that you lost out on, or the way that you were when you see things later from a new perspective. Even just other things that are difficult to cope with, like disappointment, right? When things just don't go the way we want them to go, or things are out of our control. I think that that there's a very fine line between experiencing negative frustrations or everyday difficulties or challenges or things that are unfair or disappointing in a way that's traumatic versus in a way that is bearable but just an ordinary difficulty, right?
Right, right.
And if you're given a lot of support growing up, to feel that you have a lot of people to lean on that accept you for who you are, and if you're given a sense of self and a sense of self-worth, then you're strong enough to handle these little painful pockets as just a little detail, right? It's just a criticism, or it's just a regret, or it's just a loss, or it's just a disappointment, or it's just something that didn't go the way I wanted it to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's too much of that too fast, or you weren't given support to cope with it, or your parents protected you and gave you the illusion that anything could be under our control as long as we try to make it that way, then people don't learn to cope. And if you don't have that inner self worth and that inner structure, looking back and feeling bad about things could take over the whole picture. You could suddenly be beset by shame or humiliation or rage or unbearable void and darkness. So to be able to cope with some of these difficult experiences and some of the emotions that might come up when we reflect on ourselves and when we really sit with ourselves and look back on things, you have to have a certain inner structure, an inner core that's strong enough to handle that without losing track of the rest of the picture.
Right, right. No doubt. I hear that completely. I could go off in so many different directions with that. What would you say? I guess I'll start with this. What would you say to people that are raising either young children or a little bit further along the way? What would you say to the protectiveness we feel as parents? Like, this is their journey. How much do we shelter and how much do we guide? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important is there's some certain psychological theories and um, theorists that really spoke about the idea of containment and between a mother and a child. And a lot of what that has to do with is that the parent does some psychological work on behalf of the child's emotional experiences, and that you actually absorb and take in some of your child's pain, and you don't make it better and you don't make it go away, but you carry it with them
Mm-hmm.
and you sort of digest it for them a little bit, and you help them to cope with it and you lend them some of your own coping, right? So I think that rather than focusing on how much we should protect our children, not protect our children, get involved, not get involved, try to shelter them, I think it's much more about modeling for our children how to cope.
Mm-hmm.
How to cope with things that are disappointing, that are painful, that are difficult, that are challenging, that are hard, and how to cope with emotions.
Right.
And that when a parent is able to cope and to really cope, right, then the child learns, they internalize that skill, and they're able to have a model of someone who's going through struggles. You don't want a parent to be too perfect
Right.
or to pretend they're too perfect, because the child then doesn't see the parent struggling. they don't have a model for what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when a child doesn't see a parent really doing psychological work and trying to, a child has to know that the parent is affected by them, that they're impacted by them, that there's a struggle that the parent has to go through in their parenting. If they see the parent come out through that on the other side, and that they are able to really be able to get perspective, or to digest things, or to process things, or work something through, that's much more helpful than trying to just protect your child, or to act like everything's okay when it's really not, so it's very important to be real as parents, and to allow our kids to see that struggle that we go through for them, which is an act of love, right? To really struggle for somebody, right?
God, I so agree with you, because I remember sometimes I'd come home from school, and my parents, they never fought in front of us ever. And I don't, I'm sure you don't believe that any parent should fight in front of their kids. But boy, you could feel that tension.
Yeah.
And I would ask my mom, what's going on? Nothing, and she would never share anything. And it, I know that in my own life, it taught me, though, when I would have a fight with my spouse or something, we always tried to keep it tamed for our children. But at the same time, we would also be real and also make up, like, you know what, everything's okay with mom and dad now. And what do you think of that? Like, you don't want to fight, but you want to be real.
Yeah, I think that when something's going on, kids have to be allowed to have it named for them.
Hmm.
So, you know, it, some couples fight better than others.
Yeah, no, no doubt.
Some know how to work through a conflict better than others. But if there's a fight happening and the kids are picking up on it, I much rather the parent just name it. Yeah, I'm mad at your dad right now, but we always work things out in the end, right? So you
Right.
can kind of give a coping spin on it. You can kind of say, we're going to survive this, we're going to be okay. But I wouldn't want to deny it to the kid, because
Right.
being able to talk about things and name what's happening makes it much more concrete, much more bearable, and much more boundaried, right, for the child. So I think that's, real doesn't mean that you have no boundaries, or that you don't protect your child from anything, or you don't keep anything private.
Mhm.
But if a kid feels it and they're picking up on tension, or they know what's happening anyways, I think it's way better to talk about it. Just let
Right.
them know this is what's going on. We'll get through this, though.
Right. Yeah, that's good. It's like that reassurance that things do happen,
Yeah.
but
And
we're
that what you're seeing is real. I am a big believer that one of the number one things that turn kids into resilient, healthy human beings
Mhm.
is when parents validate the reality that the kid is picking up on. That when you have your perceptions affirmed, when somebody is giving you a certain mirroring of what you experience as real and true, and giving you the affirmation and the validation that your experience is real, the way that you experience it, that creates a sense of self. And kids could cope with almost anything, not everything. Yes, there are some really horrible things that kids can't cope with, but I would say almost everything can be coped with if
Mhm.
someone allows you to have it validated that, yes, this is happening, and yes, your experience of it is valid and is real. I think that's a huge, huge protective factor for people.
I agree, 100%. I want to shift it real quick just because of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Would you say it's a really good time to work on goals? Like whether it is to get in shape, whether it's to start eating healthier, or maybe get in an exercise program because you're home, or maybe even develop something new. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good time in general for reflection, right? For
Mhm.
kind of taking stock of your life, reevaluating, maybe stopping and slowing down, and
Mhm.
having some time to sit with yourself. Um, I think goals are great, but at the same time, I always like people to understand that when you're in a challenging situation, sometimes you're not at your best, and I like people to accept themselves too. So for some people, it might be a great time to make changes, intentional changes in certain aspects of their lives. And for other people, they might have to say, you know what, I wish I was able to do X, Y, or Z right now, but right now I just got to survive, and I'm good enough for just doing that. So I kind of think it depends on the person. But certainly it's a time where people can really look at their lives and reevaluate and reassess and think about, are there things I need to make shifts in? Are there things in my relationship that I need to accept a little bit more, or that maybe need to change for me? Are there things with my family that we want to bond around some more? Are there passions maybe that I haven't pursued? Are there inhibitions holding me back? Am I sabotaging myself over and over and over again, right? So these are good times to think. That, that would sort of be, I would say, in terms of concrete action, taking goals and turning them from a goal to something you're going to actually focus on and work on. I think for some people, yes, it's the right time. For other people, not as much. But certainly I think it's a time where everyone could be doing a little bit more thinking about things that maybe they don't pay that much attention to.
Yeah, I totally agree. So before we wrap it up, what's the most awesome thing about working with you? I already know, but what about for your?
Well, I think I have a very good mix of being able to challenge my clients while still making them feel supported and not judged. And also getting to like the real core issues. Like, my clients really change, their symptoms go away, they do get better. But we have great conversations. We enjoy talking to each other. People feel supported. They feel like I care about them. And I think having that blend is a really great mix for people. So I feel proud of that.
Yeah, well, I'm proud of you. You do awesome work.
Thank you.
So yeah. Anything else you want to mention that would be good for people?
I just want to reiterate that it's just really hard to be gentle with yourselves if you're changing, if you're going through transformations, if you're looking at things in your life and maybe having thoughts or feelings about them. Just be gentle, just be loving. It can be hard. Change happens really quickly. There's not a lot of time for transition. All our lives have been changed in a very dramatic way, very, very quickly, very suddenly. There wasn't really time to prepare for it. So we all have to just give ourselves a lot of extra love at this time and be gentle.
About it. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. All right. This is good. This is
All
fun.
right. That was fun. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. All right, everyone out there, have a great day.
Yes. Have an awesome day. Bye.